When I first saw the tweet this morning, I was frankly disgusted. I thought to myself, this dude has got such a fixation with women and blood. What is wrong with him? You realize that what he is doing is not just acting for Donald Trump. He's acting for all of us. He's acting for our president. And he is embarrassing. He is shameful. He is disgusting. And then you remember that this dude, this disgusting dude, is the president of the United States. And you realize just how much he is diminishing the presidency of the United States.
Why did Ana Navarro call Trump's antics a diversion circus? From Rosie O'Donnell to the Epstein files, she's connecting it all and taking Trump to task in the process. How does she expose his wildest distraction tricks? Discover the clever ways Navarro unravels the strategy behind the chaos. Before we move on, I will like you to subscribe to the channel and like the video. Ana Navarro's take on the constant frenzy surrounding Donald Trump is sharp, biting, and to be honest, almost too accurate. According to her, it wasn't just chaotic outbursts or random drama. It was a full-blown strategy. And let's be real, Trump didn't just happen to find himself in feuds every other week. He thrived on them. Whether it was a petty beef with Rosie O'Donnell or some off-the-wall conspiracy about Barack Obama's birth certificate, Navarro points out that it wasn't just him being Trump. It was him working overtime to keep us busy looking one way while something much more serious was happening elsewhere.
Honestly, if it was Kamala Harris behaving this way, they'd call her hormonal and hysterical, right? Look.
We'd have to get elected to be.
But, well, yes, and if she had been elected, craziness and the way that he acts, and this is not in a vacuum, because it's not just the tariffs. It's the first thing he did was attack Panama, Greenland, Denmark, Canada, allies. With these tariffs, again, went in with a sledgehammer, caused fear, destruction, distrust, when it could have been done with a scalpel in a strategic way. That's just not the way he operates.
Take, for instance, the notorious feud with Rosie O'Donnell that started in the early 2000s. At first glance, it seemed like standard Trump theatrics, name-calling, insults, and over-the-top media coverage. But Navarro reminds us that this wasn't just Trump being petty, this was Trump turning the media into his personal circus. By saying outrageous things about O'Donnell, he guaranteed coverage, knowing the public would eat it up. And you know what? The media played along, giving him airtime for every jab and insult. All this while more serious questions, like his connections to figures like Jeffrey Epstein, lingered largely in the background. The result? An explosion of noise that drowned out quieter, more damaging stories that might have taken him down. Ana doesn't hold back when she talks about Trump's talent for distracting the masses. She frames his behavior as a version of throwing spaghetti at the wall to see what sticks. He would bombard the public with so many wild claims, spats, and scandals that it became impossible to focus on just one thing for long. His Twitter feed alone was like a chaotic fire hose of controversy. When the public started catching on to something shady, like his tax dealings or ties to Russia, suddenly there'd be a tweet storm about NFL players kneeling during the national anthem, or a cruel jab at a celebrity. Navarro saw through it, and she called it out as a deliberate strategy to keep people from looking too closely at the really dangerous stuff.
I'm really tired of hearing words like disappointed, like disturbed, like I'm bothered, like I wish he wouldn't do it. It's time that somebody looks at the camera and looks at him and calls him up and says, listen, you crazy lunatic 70-year-old man baby, stop it. I can't start talking about tax reform. I can't start talking about healthcare reform because I can't get past the fact that we have a president who lacks the sufficient character. You are now the president of the United States, the commander-in-chief, and you need to stop acting like a mean girl because we just won't take it. We won't vote with you. We won't work with you. We have a president who is mean.
Her argument hits harder when you line it up against key moments in his presidency. Remember the chaos surrounding the border separation policy? Every time horrific images of crying children hit the news, Trump would lob another distraction grenade, maybe a sudden wild attack on CNN, or even a bizarre joke about dating his own daughter. When the Mueller investigation started heating up, his Twitter insults skyrocketed. And as Navarro notes, this wasn't just luck or coincidence. It was a well-oiled tactic meant to shift the focus as soon as real pressure began to mount against him. Research into presidential crises actually backs this up. Political analysts have pointed out that during moments of intense scrutiny, Trump consistently turned up the noise. Take the time during the Charlottesville fallout. His widely criticized response, that infamous "very fine people on both sides" comment, led to a storm of outrage. But within days, he picked fights with football players and the media, and those new arguments were all the press could talk about. Navarro makes the case crystal clear. Trump wasn't navigating the chaos. He was actively creating it, knowing it would work to his advantage. But this isn't just about distractions. Navarro suggests there might be something deeper at play. Was this behavior a carefully calculated strategy? Or was it just a reflection of a larger issue with who Trump is at his core? When someone's every move is geared towards stirring outrage, how much of that comes from a deliberate plan and how much comes from simply being addicted to the attention? That's the question Navarro raises. There's a point where the line between strategy and personality blur, and in Trump's case, it seems like one feeds off the other. One of Navarro's boldest critiques connects this idea to the damage done to public discourse. She argues that by normalizing distraction culture, Trump didn't just shield himself from accountability, he also redefined leadership in the worst way possible. People now expect politicians to double down on drama and dodge tough questions by yelling louder. The real cost: issues that actually matter, healthcare, climate change, and education, to name a few, were sidelined in favor of circus-worthy fights. That's not just bad for politics, that's bad for everyone. If there's one thing Navarro's analysis leaves us with, it's that Trump's reliance on public outrage wasn't just harmful, it was intentional. By keeping everyone's focus locked on his feuds or meltdowns, he ensured that people didn't have time or energy to follow the bigger stories. And it worked. But Navarro doesn't stop here. She's not just pointing fingers at Trump's distractions, she's also digging deeper into what those wild antics say about his personality, his view of power, and his impact on the country.
Have you noticed that with everything going on with deportations, with everything going on in the Trump administration, have there been signs from this group of remorse?
Yes. Nicaraguan, Haitian, Cuban, and Venezuelan exile communities. And those are precisely the communities that have been the most targeted by these Trump policy changes and deportations, and pisses me off so much. Because, you are supposed to care about other human beings, even if they're not your friend or your colleague or your neighbor. You are supposed to care just because you're supposed to care out of humanity.
What do a toddler and a former president have in common? According to Ana Navarro, a lot, and none of it's flattering for Trump. She famously called him a 70-year-old man baby. And honestly, once you hear her reasoning, it's hard to disagree. Navarro uses humor to make her point, but the message beneath the joke is much more serious. Trump's approach to leadership, if you can even call it that, looked a lot like a series of meltdowns, tantrums, and grudge matches that belong more in a daycare than the White House. What's worse, Navarro points out, is that these actions weren't just embarrassing blips in history, they had real consequences. When revenge becomes policy, people suffer. The countless immigrant families impacted by his abrupt decisions weren't dealing with thoughtful governance. They were dealing with a man whose grudges turned cruel. Navarro argues that this erosion of democratic norms didn't happen quietly either.
We have a president who is nasty. We have a president who is immature, unstable, and just acts like a crazy person with anybody who attacks him, because he's got thin skin and he is never going to pivot. Stop enabling him. Confront this, and confront this hard, or it will never stop, and it will embarrass all of us. It will take the presidency low, low, low. And anybody around him, whether it's his daughter, his chief of staff, his wife, who I remind you had said her signature issue was going to be fighting against online bullying.
Her humor about Trump acting like a man baby might be biting, but it's deeply rooted in her belief that his impulses had massive ripple effects. Leaders are supposed to guide, inspire, and plan for the long term. What happens when a leader prioritizes scoring personal points or tearing people down instead? Navarro suggests that's exactly why Trump's presidency felt like a series of chaotic, grudge-fueled episodes. He wasn't building anything lasting, he was venting, lashing out, and trying to settle feuds while the real work of governing collected dust. That's where the toddler comparison becomes impossible to dismiss. Temper tantrums might be annoying in the sandbox, but in the Oval Office, they destabilize a nation. Still, Navarro doesn't doesn't just make jokes and move on. She's serious about the deeper implications of this behavior. To her, Trump's obsession with revenge wasn't just about him, it set a dangerous precedent. It showed the world that in modern politics, personal vendettas can become platforms. Policies can be designed not around what's best for the people, but around who the leader wants to punish or reward. And once that pattern takes hold, it's hard to reverse. Navarro echoes concerns shared by many political experts about the erosion of democratic norms under Trump's leadership. When distractions and tantrums take center stage, the values that hold a democracy together, accountability, fairness, respect for institutions, start to crack. Ana Navarro's sharp critique cuts through Trump's chaos with one key message. Distraction and revenge aren't leadership. She argues a leader's power isn't meant for personal score settling, but for serving the people. When power becomes a tool for retribution, it shifts from governance to something far more troubling. Her warning, don't get swept into distraction. That's how leaders dodge accountability, and how the public loses sight of what really matters. Navarro reminds us that staying informed and questioning those in power are the only ways to protect democracy. Or, as she puts it, leadership isn't a circus act, it's responsibility.